After having looked at all of these various aspects of the Constitution, the last little portion really for us to look at is constitutional change. Now, one of the things that was really beneficial for us from the founding fathers was the fact that they understood society was going to change. They understood that the world of 2020 would be very, very different from the world of, say, 1789. As a result, they wanted to make sure that it would be possible to change the Constitution. Now, the idea, however, was not that it was going to be easy to change. It was not something that was supposed to be changed for frivolous little bits here and there, but it had to be something upon which a large proportion of the American people wanted this change in order for it to occur. Now, there are a couple of ways that changes can actually come. Now, constitutional changes can occur either through the formal amendment process or through a number of informal processes. We have had 27 changes to the Constitution. Those are the 27 amendments. However, there have been a number of things that have changed over the course of time that have resulted through informal change. The best example of that would be political parties. There is nothing in the Constitution to talk about political parties, and yet they are there, and they're very, very important to the daily workings of our government. Now, formal amendments to the Constitution change the actual written language of the Constitution. They go through and they either add something to the original text or they remove something from the original text. We've gone through and we have changed our Constitution some 27 times since it was ratified. Each time that has either been a situation where we've added something, for example, the right to vote for women, 18-year-olds, African Americans, etc. Other times we've gone through and we have deleted different things. For example, the original way the Electoral College was supposed to work was that whoever got the most votes in the Electoral College would be President of the United States. Whoever got the second most votes in the Electoral College would be Vice President of the United States. And if that were to happen, if that were still the case today, we would at this very moment have in Washington, D.C., President Trump and Vice President Clinton. And I leave that to your imagination as to how well or poorly that would actually turn out. Now, it's Article 5 of the Constitution that outlines the procedures for a formal amendment. There's really no set procedure for an informal amendment, so we're going to talk first and foremost about the formal amendment process, how you actually go through and set everything up to actually change some of the language of the Constitution itself. Now, there are two stages to the amendment process, okay, proposal and ratification. And each of those have alternate routes, okay? So we're going to start off with first and foremost the proposal, okay? Now, an amendment to the Constitution can be proposed by either a two-thirds vote in each House or Chamber of Congress or a national convention called by Congress at the request of two-thirds of the state legislatures. So in other words, an amendment can start off in the House or the Senate as long as you get two-thirds vote from each of those. Okay, there can be a national constitutional convention called at the request of the state legislatures. That has never occurred. It is something that is talked about periodically. It would be called a convention of states. And it is something that could theoretically happen. However, keep in mind that if you do have a constitutional convention like that, you are legitimately talking about everything is on the table. There is no limit as to what can be changed at that point in time. Okay, so an amendment can be proposed by a two-thirds vote in each House or that national convention. Well, that's just the proposal part. That is just saying, all right, we want to change the Constitution in this particular way. Then you have ratification. Now, we spoke about ratification in regards to the Constitution itself. Well, if we're going to have an amendment, those amendments have to be ratified as well. An amendment can be ratified either by the legislatures of three-fourths of the state or by special state conventions called in three-fourths of the states. So again, we're kind of getting back to that original concept of having the special conventions to go through and vote yay or nay on this Or you can go through and have the legislatures of three-fourths of the states approve it. The idea is that this way it is something much closer to the people themselves making the decision. The state legislature is thought to be much closer to the people, say, of the state of, say, California than, any other state legislature would be to the people of the state of California. On with these formal amendments, thus far, all the amendments to the Constitution have been proposed by Congress. Okay, we have never had a constitutional convention convened since the original one in Philadelphia. And all except one of the successful amendments have been ratified through the state legislatures. So you can see that the system is set up to get this done in a couple of different ways, but thus far we've really only used one. We've never gone through and had the Convention of States. I have heard it referred to as essentially the emergency ripcord that the framers left in there in the event that the national government became corrupt or so out of touch that it left the people the ability to pull that emergency ripcord and then hopefully be able to get things back on track. The president has no formal role in amending the Constitution. The president can go through and he can work very hard trying to convince people that this is the way it should be, or yay or nay on whatever the amendment is. But when it comes to the actual rules and regulations regarding this, the president doesn't have a role. He can have his opinion and he can share that opinion, but he doesn't have any role. It's not like it has to go through this process and then it goes to the president for signature. It's not like a bill. It's not like a bill becoming a law. This is something that is totally and utterly different. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the question of what are the effects of a formal amendment to the Constitution. Okay, formal amendments have been made to make the Constitution more egalitarian and more democratic. Think about the fact that a great number of amendments, I can think of 3, have been exclusively dealing with voting rights. If you want to just go with the right to vote, not even accounting for things like poll taxes and stuff like that. So the idea is that most of these changes have made the system more democratic. It has allowed more people to be able to join in and actually have a say in what happens in regards to their country. Now, there is and has been an emphasis on economic issues in the original document, but that has been balanced by amendments that stress equality and increase the ability of popular majority to affect government. The idea is that while, yes, there was that fear at the outset of an economic elite running everything and controlling every aspect of national policy, we now have gone through and we've balanced the Constitution more so that there is a greater probability of some form of majority of what the people want is what's going to get passed. Remember, the whole concept with a republic like ours is the fact that the sovereignty remains with the people themselves. The people are sovereign. They are the ones who are the final arbiter of what is supposed to happen within our nation. And so a number of these changes over the course of time have tried to balance that out and try to go through and make the system a little more responsive. Most important effect has been to expand liberty and equality in America. Now, this is not to say equality of results. There is a phenomenal difference between the equality and opportunity and equality of results. Okay, the Constitution has been designed to try and make sure everybody has the same footing, that everybody starts off on a level playing field, and that they are able to go through and have the same chance as anybody else. It is not set up to try and make sure that everybody ends up at the same place or with the same stuff or anything along those lines. It is more about the equality of opportunity. So the effect of all of these various amendments has been to expand the liberty enjoyed by the people of the United States and to expand their chance to have and live the American dream. Now, those were formal amendments. What about informal amendments? Okay, we've talked already about how you go through and how you change the Constitution literally. Now, how do we change it informally? Because there have been a number of informal changes as well as formal changes, and all of these have had an effect over the course of time. Now, the Constitution may change informally through things like judicial interpretation, okay, through political practice, through demands on policymakers, or as a result of changes in technology. All of these things can change how we go about living our lives. And as a result, they have had an effect on the Constitution. Now, none of these changes have had any kind of formal requirements or any kind of amendment process, but they have had an effect nonetheless. Now, judicial interpretation can profoundly affect how we go through and understand our Constitution. We have the 9 justices on the Supreme Court. Their word is final when it comes to the Constitution. If they have made the decision that A, B, C, or D is or is not constitutional, the only choice beyond that is to formally change the Constitution. And as a result, you've had a number of different areas of constitutional law that aren't specified in the Constitution are now seen as common. Best example would be the right to privacy. The Supreme Court has ruled that we do have a right to privacy, even though there is no such thing listed anywhere in the Constitution. Okay, that right to privacy is an informal change brought about through a judicial decision. So you can see how the courts interpret the Constitution can have a huge effect. That's why there is always such a large to-do during a presidential election about the Supreme Court. Because whoever the justices on the court are, they are going to have the ability to affect what is happening in the nation for decades to come. Remember, we'll talk about this later, but remember, justices, federal judges, they are appointed for life. They are there until such time as they decide to retire, or they retire essentially through what could only be described as natural causes. So judicial interpretation can have a huge. Another thing, changes in political practice can alter the meaning of the Constitution. Okay, think about it this way, and there's going to be a little, put them both up because that one goes first. Development of political parties dramatically changed the form of American government. There is nothing in the Constitution that speaks of political parties. But if I were to ask today who are the 2 main political parties in the United States, I am willing to bet every student in this class would say the Republicans and the Democrats. Well, yes, that is absolutely true. However, they're not listed in the Constitution. Parties came about after the fact, and we have accepted them as a normal course of action. In fact, it is party membership and party numbers that really determine the Speaker of the House, chairman of the various committees, and things such as that. So political parties have had a huge impact, even though they're not really listed there. Changing political practice has altered the role of the Electoral College. Okay, now today, the Electoral College is often seen as a rubber stamp. In fact, we just had a Supreme Court decision talking about what are referred to as faithless electors. Now, a faithless elector is someone who has been chosen to go to D.C. to do the actual official voting for president. There is now some rules in place that they have to do what the people of their state want. We go through, we have our election. You have the people of California vote. Majority chooses candidate A. The electors then go back to D.C. and they cast their vote for candidate A. They are representing what the people of the state of California, for example, want. Now, the thing is, you can't see it in a way as a rubber stamp because quite literally, no matter what happens, they're supposed to do what the people tell them. And we've had, just a little bit more clarification in that of late. Now, the Constitution has also changed via technology. Think about it. Technology back when the Constitution was written was essentially the printing press. That was the technology. Today, think about the mass media and the role it plays. Now, mass media was unimagined back in the 18th century. Yes, we did have newspapers, but we didn't have the press like we do today. Think about the 24-hour news cycle that we have, where we go through and we see the news all the time, and it does have an effect. Think about, for example, social media. There are those who are quite pleased that President Trump tweets a lot. There are those who are quite displeased that President Trump tweets a lot. I leave it up to you to decide if you're happy or sad about that. But concepts like that. Teddy Roosevelt said that the presidency was a bully pulpit, and he didn't even have the technology that we have today. So you can see how, as time progresses, things change. The State of the Union address, for example, that used to just be information from the president to the Congress about the State of the Union. Now it is a huge production which is watched by millions of people. So you can see how things do change over time just because of technology. Now, the bureaucracy has grown in importance with the advent of technological developments like computers. You now have the ability to track more stuff. I have heard it said before that computers allow more people to do less quicker than ever before. And you think about it, look at your phones. Look at the fact that you have access to the entirety of human knowledge on your phone, and most of you use it to be on Instagram, Snapchat, or playing video games. But the bureaucracy has grown. It's become more important as they go through, and they work to try to make sure that they have all of the information necessary for the government to function. The very concept of electronic communications, okay, and the development of atomic weapons have enhanced the president's role as commander-in-chief. When Washington was commander-in-chief, yes, he was the commander-in-chief the same way that the president today is. But today, the president has instant global communication. The president today can, in an instant, order the release of nuclear weapons and, radically change the world. So you can see how technology has gone through and made a vast difference in regards to what the Constitution actually how it works. The power of the presidency has grown as a direct result of increased demands for new policies. Okay. Now, the United States' growth to the status of superpower in international affairs has put additional power in the hands of the chief executive. Okay. National security concerns tend to result in more power to the president, although Congress tends to reassert itself eventually. It is the fact that the framers originally thought that Congress would be the most important portion of government. The argument being that's why they were first in the Constitution. Today, we have a tendency to see the executive branch as more important because they have a much bigger policy-making role. And so, as a result, sometimes you'll get into a little fight between the executive and the legislative over who actually has more power and authority. And sometimes that's because of partisan differences. You might have a Republican in the White House and Democrats in the House of Representatives. Or you can have the same party. You can have both be Republican or both be Democrat, and you can still have a fight over who's more important because both of them are convinced and they know that, obviously they are. Increased demand for domestic policy have placed the president in a more prominent role. Okay, things like preparing the federal budget, proposing a legislative program. That is one of the things that you see in regards to the State of the Union. The president can't actually put forward some kind of legislation on the floor of the House, but he can go through and put forth a legislative policy that his party would then work on getting passed. That's the kind of thing that we're seeing here. The president has a role in creating the federal budget now that really came about through the New Deal. And it is one of those many responsibilities that the president now has, that there was no formal rule change. There was no amendment to this. But instead, it was just a informal change that. And so we got the importance of flexibility. Now, the fact that the Constitution is flexible, that it can go through and change with time, is one of the key aspects of our Constitution. Okay? The United States is the oldest functioning constitution in existence today. If it had been carved exclusively in stone that nothing could change, there could be no formal or informal changes to it, it would have broken up years ago. But the thing is, the framers created a flexible system of government, one that could adapt to the needs of the times without sacrificing personal freedom. The framers set things up so that here we are more than 200 years later, we're still using the same Constitution and we're still enjoying the same protections, even though it's not word for word the same. Even though the actions of government might seem very different from what they would have been in the late 1700s, our republic has managed to survive because of the flexibility of our Constitution. Even with 27 amendments, the Constitution is a short document. You've read it, or at least you were supposed to have read it by now. It does not prescribe the structure and functioning of the national government in detail. It paints with a broad brush. The Constitution is there to sort of hit the highlights and let us know how we're supposed to go down the road. It doesn't give us the directions. It just gives us the general heading.